Hey, I figured out that in today's video, on this extremely fine day, we are going to be talking about the thing that I first thought about when I opened my eyes this morning, which is kind of weird. But when I opened my eyes this morning, the first thing that I thought about was how cool are those two presence controls that you find on the new Friedman Jose amplifier. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, basically Friedman came out with this new Friedman Jose thing, and it had two presence controls. Why would you need two presence controls? And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in this video. Marshall presence controls. We're going to mod it. We are going to hear it. We're going to graphically see how it works. We're going to explain everything, all the good stuff that you usually find on this channel. Now, if you're first time on this channel, please subscribe to it because it's free and it's great. And if you're first time here, then you should know that in pretty much every video, I show you this thing. This is my shroom cup. It is absolutely fantastic. I mean, look at the colors. Look at the detail. And you know what's new? I actually reached out to the lady who makes these because these things are custom shop, master build. She's actually working on some new designs, new colors and stuff. I saw some pictures and I ordered new ones, so it makes me really happy. Now, that being said, I invite you to spend the next few minutes with me talking everything about Marshall presence circuits, realizing how you can mod it by yourself, and we are also going to be talking about some improvements. So if you're ready, let's go. All right, so here's the plan. The first thing we need to do is we need to explain what a presence circuit is, and we're going to explain it in a slightly technical way. So you see, books have been written about negative feedback circuits, and the presence circuit is part of the negative feedback circuit. So a lot of you have heard that there is something called negative feedback in our amplifiers. Basically, the important stuff about negative feedback is that negative feedback actually happens in the power section of the amplifier. A portion of the signal is taken from the speaker and fed back to a certain place in the circuit, which is sort of like out of phase, and it's used to do like a lot of different things, which we are not going to be discussing in this video, but for sure in some other video, yeah, for sure. But in that part of the circuit, we add the presence network, and the presence network is basically just like a filter. So in the presence network, we just cut out some highs, and as a result, we are gonna get some highs. Does that make sense? Probably not, but that's because it's a negative feedback circuit. It's out of phase, so it sort of just does the opposite, all right? And we're gonna take a look at how this whole thing works. All right, so take a look at this. So here is the point on the secondary of the output transformer that we take our signal, and it goes through here, goes through this feedback resistor, which is a very popular component, and it creates a voltage divider with this component over here, and basically it is read over here and it's connected to the phase inverter. That's absolutely cool. Now, as part of this circuit, we also have a filter. This is this presence network. Now, why am I explaining all these things? Well, a few things are very important. We need to understand what actually Friedman did in his amplifier. Basically, he created two presence networks that are switchable with a switchy switch, which is a cool feature, I guess. I don't think that I really need two presence circuits in my amplifier, but why am I making this video? If this is not that important, why are we talking about it in this video? Well, let me tell you something. When Marshall built amplifiers back in the day, they were, using all kinds of components that they had, and I really don't know the year, and I really don't know the reason, but what I know is that when I would get older Marshalls, they would either have a 0.1 microfarad capacitor as part of the presence network, or a 0.68 microfarad capacitor, which you can actually see on the schematic right over here. Why is that important? Well, in my opinion, my extremely humble opinion, it's extremely important because changing this component changes absolutely everything in the amplifier. It's like a new amplifier, a completely different thing. And that makes it super cool to have both of them. So today we're going to be exploring how it actually changes the sound. We're going to hear it, we're going to see it, and all that kind of good stuff. Now, it's also worth mentioning before the comment or cavalry charges in my flanks is that, yes, this is a typical Marshall presence network that you would normally see, but sometimes back in the day they were using different potentiometers. They were using this 5K potentiometer, which is just not really a great idea because there was DC going over it, and when the wiper would fail, then you would have problems with the amplifier. So they switched over to this thing, which you would normally see in Marshalls. One more important thing to keep in mind is that the feedback resistor is not always the same value. For example, in my amplifier, I use a 47K. Alright, so we understood like the negative feedback and where the presence network is and actually what it does. How can we calculate now this presence network and where it cuts off and what does it actually do? We want to know more about the frequencies. We actually have like 3 ways of doing it, like 3 ways come to my mind now. There's the overly simple, not so precise way, which is easy and pretty much good enough. There's the second way, which we are going to be exploring using LT Spice, and there is the third way of just like doing the cumbersome mathematical calculations for feedback networks, and we are not going to be doing that one because that's fucking boring and we get nothing out of it. All right, so method number 1 is that basically we need to realize that this voltage divider, these 2 resistors are effectively in parallel, and we need to calculate the equivalent resistance, and then we can plug in the value of our capacitor and we are going to find out where the cutoff frequency is. This method is not exactly precise, but it gives us a really good idea about where the cutoff frequency is going to be happening. Now, in my amplifier, I use a 47K and a 4.7K resistive divider, and if we use this conversion calculators from DigiKey, because why would we do these things manually? Because we obviously have the calculators. So if we input 47K and 4.7K, we get an equivalent resistance of 4.27K. Then we can go to the RC network calculator. Obviously, calculators, people. We are allowed to use them on the Academy, all right? So we're going to use the 4.27K, which is the equivalent resistance, and we are also going to input the capacitance value, which in case number 1 is 0.1 microfarads, and we get a cutoff frequency of 372 hertz. So basically what your presence control is approximately going to be doing, it's going to be tilting your signal, basically giving you a boost from like 372 hertz approximately. Now, what happens with the other combination with the 0.68 microfarad thing? Well, if we input 0.68 microfarads, we're going to get a rather low frequency, 54 hertz. Even though this is not exactly precise, which we are going to be seeing in the moment, what we can infer from this, if we just remember how usually the Marshall presence control works, because it's usually a 0.1, it usually gives you a lot of brightness. It becomes spiky a little bit. Then if we move the cutoff frequency lower, that means that it's probably gonna be bringing in some more mid-range. All right, now before I jump into the LT Spice thing, it is very important to understand one thing here. The presence circuit is not only an equalizer. The presence circuit actually works on many different levels, but as a result, you will get some changes in the frequency range, but also the presence circuit adds some gain to the overall sound. And usually people who play a Marshall will keep the presence in the range a little bit more up because they want this, you know, grinding sound that happens when you raise the presence. And I'm talking about real Marshalls, vintage Marshalls. I understand that not all new Marshalls work like this and sound like this, but that's quite unfortunate. Alright, so I prepared something really nice for you. I prepared an entire circuit in LT Spice and I modified it so it sort of behaves like the Marshall circuit, and we can now actually simulate the entire range of the presence control and see what happens with the frequencies. As I said before, this is not 100% precise, but it's far more precise than what was happening with, like the simple calculation that we were doing just a moment ago. So for 0.1, we are gonna be getting this. Okay, so every line basically represents a number on our presence control, where, at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is what is going to be happening with the actual frequencies. Now, I actually prepared something else for you. Take a look at this. This is super cool. We can actually have these plots side by side and we can see what the differences are between them. So on the left side, we have the 0.1 capacitor, and on the right side, we have the 0.68 microfarad capacitor. And you can clearly see that there is more mid-range happening with the 0.68. Now, I did say that the presence network doesn't really add only frequencies, it also adds some of this like distortion and stuff. That also happens with the 0.68, but you're gonna get more mid-range distortion, which is going to create a completely different sound, but a great sound nonetheless. By the way, if you find the content of this video useful, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, really helps the channel out, and visit the Slightly Technical Academy at slightlytechnicalacademy.com, where I am actually doing a lot of things. There are some really cool Tonex packs of this amplifier as well, and I'm currently working on my first course, which is going to be something like this video, but like 100 times more crazy. We go balls deep into all this stuff with all the graphs and testing and modding and that kind of stuff. So go subscribe over there. It's absolutely free. You have some tech pages. I'm posting stuff about the projects that I'm doing. So go check out the Slightly Technical Academy. Now we're coming to the part of the video where I'm gonna fire up the evil machine and we're gonna listen to the presence circuit, actually how it works with the 0.1 microfarad capacitor. Then we're gonna mod it and then we're gonna do a lot of comparisons. So let me just go and fire this thing up. Alright, so what's important here? Take a listen to this. I've got the presence control now at 3 o'clock, and in most Marshalls, like the vintage ones, when you use the presence control with the 0.1 microfarad capacitor, this is the place where you're going to keep the presence control. Obviously, it depends on the cabinet, but usually this is the case. Now, why is that the case? We're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the video, but listen to this. I'm going to roll the presence now down, and you're going to hear what's happening. Alright, so not only that we are getting this upper frequency range boosted, but we're also getting some of the gain, and the amplifier actually feels much better. The problem is that you have all this range before 3 o'clock where pretty much nothing is happening. Now I understand it might be useful if you have some really bright cabinet, but it's not a particularly well-tailored control. basically you got the idea. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to be replacing that 0.1 microfarad capacitor with this one. I also have it from some old Marshall, a 68 nanofarad capacitor, and we're gonna listen to the difference. All right, so this is the control unmoved, so 3 o'clock. Let's see what it does. All right, so basically, again, before like 2 or 3 o'clock, nothing really is happening, but it's kind of fatter. It feels fatter. It also kind of works like a volume control, but like a tight volume control. It's actually pretty good. All right, I think you get the idea. All right, so if I have to give a comment, basically with the 68 nanofarad capacitor, it sort of works, as I said already, like a volume control, but a very nice volume control. It doesn't give you a lot of that very harsh brightness. In fact, it brings a lot of the mid-range. It brings in some like really quality distortion. You know what I mean? Like it clips in a different way. I feel like this would be the choice for someone who doesn't really like the highs, but likes their Marshall to be a little bit fatter, because it is a case that a lot of Marshalls do kind of have this shrill sound, so maybe this would be the right mod for that kind of amplifier. Now, how can we improve this whole thing? Well, I actually want to talk about something that I pretty much don't see anybody talking about, which is kind of weird. You already saw that the way how these controls work on older Marshalls is that pretty much before like 3 o'clock or before 7 or 8, nothing really happens. There's this huge range of the potentiometer that is absolutely unused, and there's actually a simple way how to fix this. Everything that you need is this: a new potentiometer, even though this small one is something that I don't like putting in Marshalls because I like them big, you know, just like for aesthetic reasons. But the whole point is, what you need is an actual reverse logarithmic potentiometer, because normally the 22K or the 25K used in these Marshalls is a linear potentiometer, which is not exactly the right choice for this type of circuit. So if you use a reverse logarithmic potentiometer, it will not change the sound in any way, because in the extreme positions it is going to be exactly the same, but in the in-between positions you're going to have more of that nice range that you actually hear, and you can dial in your sound much, not only much easier, but you will also explore some of the hidden sounds that were located between like 8 and 9. Does that make sense? So naturally, I prepared some plots for you guys so you can actually see exactly what I'm talking about here. Now take a look at this. On the right side we have the old linear style of potentiometer, and on the left side we have the plot as if the potentiometer were reverse logarithmic. The distance between these lines is much more equal. That basically through this plot means that what we are going to be hearing is a more equal change as we turn the potentiometer, unlike the other one where you have basically the first 7 numbers change very little, and then you have a huge change in the end of the taper. So basically what we are going to be doing now, I'm going to be exchanging a potentiometer for the presence in this lovely amplifier, and then we're going to also check it out and see how that works. Alright, so the presence control is now at 130. That would be like maybe around 7. But basically, I have the full range now, much more useful. Well, it's not really the full range, at least with this cabinet, because depending on the cabinet, it's going to sound different. But definitely, it's at least 50% better, because take a listen to the range now. So basically whatever was happening between 8 and 10 is happening now between 4 and 10 approximately. But basically maybe you also hear that I returned the 0.1 microfarad capacitor because that's the one that I keep in this amplifier. You know, I was doing these mods to other people, like, you know, adding this 25 reverse log potentiometer, but I was too lazy to do it in my own amp, and this was a very good opportunity. I'm keeping it this way because it's absolutely lovely. Something like that. Alright, so you got the general idea. Well, a few things are very important to mention before we end this video. It is not the end. Alright, I don't really know what brands use a reverse logarithmic potentiometer that do like Marshalls. I know for sure that you're gonna find something like this in an Angle and some other brands. I know that Marshall doesn't really do this. I have no idea what Dave is going to be putting in his amplifiers, but it's worth noting that finding a 25K or a 22K reverse logarithmic potentiometer is not that easy. A good one. I'm talking about a good one. The one that I use now is the spare part that you can actually get for the Fender Hot Rod Deluxe. They use 25K and that's the one that I used over here. But if I find a better potentiometer that's sort of like more aesthetically pleasing, I will definitely exchange it just because of the aesthetics, because I love when I open the amplifier and everything just looks absolutely fabulous, you know? I think everything that we showed in this video is worth checking out if you have a Marshall amplifier. Well, you know, this is the part where it's like make your fucking point, Marco, because people like me to tell them what you should do. Well, I can't tell you. I gave you the examples. You know what's happening with all these things now. Make your own decision, but it's a great mod. You can mod your Marshall amplifier. If you lack some mid-range, use the 680 nanofarad capacitor. If you have the 680 nanofarad capacitor and you want the brighter thing and more of like this scooped mid illusion of the sound, then just use the 100 nano capacitor. I absolutely advise to use this presence potentiometer because it's going to open a wide range of possibilities that are going to make you very, very happy. As I said in the beginning, I think that in some amplifiers, when you exchange these two capacitors, it basically creates a completely different amplifier. It just responds very, very different. And I love that. You can see probably that I have a lot of switches in this amplifier. And this is one of those switches that I sort of said, like, no, decide on one of the caps. Don't make it switchable because it's going to be too fucking much, all right? I hope you like this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment, let me know your thoughts. What do you like? And I'll be seeing you in the next video very, very soon. Bye.